Hi, this is Shayla with Whole Motherhood, and you're listening to Moms Learning with Moms. Today we've got Stephanie with us. She is an elementary counselor right now in Nevada, and she is going to just let us know some things about what kids are facing right now and maybe how we can help a little bit. Um, I do love Stephanie. You've got to know that she's like my fun friend. If I want a good time, I go play with Steph. And so we're going to start off with her kind of telling us how she got into counseling and kind of her background. Go ahead, Steph.
Hi, everybody. So I was a stay-at-home mom for about 15 years. And when my youngest went to preschool, I thought maybe I wanted to do something enriching for myself. And so I went back to school and then to get my master's degree in education. I actually have a bachelor's in Spanish with a minor in political science. So totally unrelated fields. But for my personal values, it was important to be at home with my kids as much as I could and kind of be on their schedule and be able to be home summers and nights and weekends. And so that's why I looked in education and teaching right now. Well, hindsight's 2020, but even 5 years ago seemed like a daunting task to have to prepare and be ready for 30 kids all day every day. And I wasn't sure I had the bandwidth for that. So explored my options. There's speech pathology and psychology, and there's all sorts of stuff in the schools you can do, and landed on school counseling. So
We talked before that you have been in the high schools, the middle schools, and the elementaries. Is that kind of where did you start?
during my practicum and internship, I had experience in both high school and middle school. And then I've been now, just finished my 5th year in elementary.
Yeah, let's get into what kind of the issues that you're seeing in the elementaries right now that kids are struggling with.
It's a loaded question. So post-pandemic, I guess, is kind of like, I feel like everyone kind of marks their life now by like pre-COVID, post-COVID. The important thing to remember about education, I think this is what people forget when they're talking about it, say like in mom's groups or with your friends, you're like, well, why don't they just do this? Or this seems so foolish, why they do this? But it's not like the group of kids, it's not your mom group's kids. It's not like, oh, these kids that we just go to the park with every week, or that you see in a Sunday school class, or you might see in the neighborhood. It's not really that cross section of kids. The cross section of kids in public school is the Walmart cross section, which maybe that's a bad example, but that's kind of how I like it. When you liken it to, like, if you go to Walmart or you go to any big public space, you have people from all socioeconomic backgrounds, all walks of life, all demographics, and it creates unique challenges for public schools, right? And especially how big they are. So just some background, Nevada is the 5th largest school district in the nation, which is unusual because our city does not match the size of like LA, New York, things like that. But it's the 5th largest just in how we've grown. It's only one school district here. It's not all divided up like it would be in, how it is in California or Salt Lake City or whatever,
Hmm.
or Phoenix even. So it's huge district. We have huge schools and huge classes. So when you take a cross section of the whole public, not the people that you're comfortable being around, right? And then you throw them into these large classroom, large schools. So I would say pre-pandemic, we had everything. And post-pandemic, we have everything and more. So what I mean by that is probably the most things I'm seeing this year was anxiety. Tons of kids with like crippling anxiety, it's significant enough that they can't function in the classroom, they can't even make it into the classroom, or they're missing so much school. Also, depression. This is elementary suicide. I'm not suicide, sorry. I do have some of that, but depression,
Hmm.
anxiety. And then I think post-pandemic, what everybody thought about everybody returning to school after the shutdown, I think everybody anticipated that we'd have major learning deficits, academic deficits, but nobody anticipated the social emotional deficits that our children would have from not being with other children over the last year to 2 years.
So why do you think the separation, like why was that a problem?
So our kids, so if you think about a child development, I'm thinking we probably do most of our development by what age, 12, 13. I mean, we learn a lot of social stuff as teenagers, but as far as like, I'm just learning how to be. So for a child, everything is learning. So it's not just school where they're learning, but free time, free play is learning, interacting with peers, they're learning. They're learning how, so like, for example, a lot of the things that I'm seeing at school is we don't know how to talk kindly to people. We don't know how to share. We don't know, people aren't, our kids aren't well versed in personal space, inappropriate versus appropriate things to say to each other.
Hmm.
All kinds of things like that. Things that you learn naturally at clubs and sports and activities and in the neighborhood with your friends playing. Our kids missed like 2 years of that. So we have fifth graders functioning as third graders functioning as first graders, essentially. Right. So it becomes really problematic when you throw them all in the classroom together and say, okay, let's learn math. And we don't have our basic social skills.
What seem to be some of the solution that you're helping kids? I mean, I have my own kids with anxiety right now. How do you help them?
It's lots of issues. So for each issue, there's probably some different things you can do. But some of the basic things I think in general that our kids have gotten away from that like everyone could benefit from. So it's less screen time, which seems obvious, but kids are exhausting and parents are using on their screens or they're relying on them for their children, but less screen time. All the screen time needs to be closely monitored. I don't think, just from working at the elementary school, that any child should have a cell phone. I don't even know that I would necessarily put an age on it, but no elementary schooler for sure needs a cell phone. There's phones at school. There's capable adults at the school. I'm sure people will argue that with the recent events, with the recent shootings and things like that. However, it just is it's a distraction at school. Besides that, they are getting in a lot of trouble. So a lot of our younger kids with cell phones are the ones that aren't being closely monitored. So now you put in children that are lacking social skills and emotional skills, and then you give them access to all the information in the world. And it's really really toxic and really dangerous. So, and then we get to deal with that at school. So less screen time, I would say more exercise. Our kids aren't getting enough exercise. They're not outside enough. This is a combination of COVID, right? People have gotten kind of forced to get used to staying at home and staying inside. But also people are more nervous, I think, and more afraid, especially in big cities like Vegas, to send their kids outside to play. I think the combination of like the 24/7 news circuit on the internet can be overwhelming for parents and make them feel more scared and nervous than we need to be. So, for example, you're hearing all the bad stuff that happens all around the world, not just, if you just heard the things in your city, it would be significantly less. So kids aren't going outside. They're not getting enough exercise, which is endorphins, vitamin D, sunshine, all of those things. And then they're also consequently spending more time on electronics. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then the human connection, like our kids, a lot of our kids don't have good friends. They haven't developed friendships. They don't have good decision-making skills. We also have this new era of, I mean, for lack of a better term, helicopter parenting, where the parents are so over-involved that our students aren't allowed to make their own decisions. They're not making mistakes. They're not failing and then solving their problems.
Hmm.
Where sometimes you would just naturally do that outside or with your friends. So it's a combination of things, but I think the kids need a little more freedom and a little more unstructured playtime, and they need it without constant supervision of parents. More supervision on your electronics, less supervision in your free time.
I think that's an interesting thing that you said. It seems like part of the problem might be parents and having a fear of everything that's going on in the world, and then there comes the helicopter parenting with trying to protect all of our kids from all of this outside stuff when really we're over dramatizing the problems that are maybe closest to us. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think kids just they know more than we ever knew. So in an inappropriate way because of the internet, but also just information. When you were a kid, you probably didn't know half of what was on the news because you didn't want to sit there and watch it. It was boring to you. But now it's on your phone. You hear parents are talking about it. It's hard because in a lot of ways it's better when we're more open with our children, but it can also create a lot of undue stress and anxiety and oversharing. I think, like the lines of blurred, like when I was growing up, it was very like parent-child relationship. I'm the parent, you're the child. And it wasn't, we weren't like all on the same page. And I think in an effort to help our kids feel better and make them feel really loved, we've kind of also leveled the playing field a little bit. And I have a lot of parents that overshare, talk too much about their personal lives, about what's going on at work, and all of that, like, our kids hold on to. It's stressful, and they could probably do without a lot of that. So
That's really interesting. I can you give any guidelines on that oversharing? Like how do you make those decisions of what's too much and what is like just being informative?
that's what makes parenting hard.
Okay.
Right? It depends on the kid, depends on the situation. So probably not what you're doing or I'm doing is by way of like, if the kid comes with a question, answering their questions, and anything you read about, um, I don't know, child development, like especially in regard to trauma or anything like that. If they come to you with a question, answer it honestly, right? But answer the question. Don't answer the question and give them all this extra information that they don't need.
So, as you've been in like the elementaries, the middle schools, and the high schools, is it very similar problems, do you think, across the board? Or
Yes. So two things. One is one school counselor put it to me this way. They said, "Oh, it's the same problems, but they're bigger. By the time they get to high school, they're having the same problems, but now they're bigger with bigger consequences." And then I would say the second thing is it manifests itself differently. Problems at home or with like personal problems or things like that that our kids are struggling with, social emotional problems as an elementary school most often comes out in behavior. So they act out, they have fits, they shut down, they won't do their work, or they're screaming and yelling, things like that. So social emotional unrest, for lack of a better way to put it, I think manifests itself mostly in elementary by behavior. In middle school, this becomes social peer problems, peer relationships, right? Trouble managing those first like boyfriend, girlfriends, crushes, um, friendships. Maybe they're too isolated, or maybe they're being manipulated by someone else too much. So anyway, so peer, so behavior at elementary, peer relationships at middle school, and then at high school, I think it then becomes more significant, where then you're dealing with those problems have manifested into it's like life-changing decisions, right? Like, what path am I going to take? Where am I going to go? Can I work on this problem and work it out and become a better person? Or am I going to end up, am I going to have suicidal thoughts? Am I going to be a teen mom? Am I going to, those kinds of things. So it's just very critical. And like post-secondary plans, right? Like, what kind of adult do I want to be? Do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to trade school? So that's kind of how I conceptualize it myself.
so as you start helping these children, um, do you feel like the school counselor alone is usually sufficient to be part of the solution, or is it usually bringing in other counselors or probably for sure parents?
So it just depends on the issue. There's a lot we do in school. I mean, there's a lot we do in schools to help kids and families, especially in Las Vegas. Like I said, we have a huge district, so we connect people to housing resources, food resources, clothing resources, therapy resource, outside therapy. There's a lot we can do in the school. However, there are also a significant amount of children that need outside services. So I will often refer to for neuropsychological evaluations, psychologists, outside therapy, things like that.
Hmm.
But we'll continue to work with the kid in the school and try to also work with parent and family and give them some strategies so that they can be working on that at home, and probably a professional at home, like weekly therapy or counseling, or if they choose to go the route of medication or whatever. So
It seems like there's such a increase in all the medication too. Is that helping? What kind of harm versus help does that do?
yeah, so medication's always a loaded topic. I never tell a parent you should put your child on medication, right? That has to be a decision. Same thing. It's always like highly individualized. Depends on what kind of support the parents have, what the medical professionals say. I don't prescribe things like that. Like that would be a psychiatrist and Um, and so it just depends. There are for sure some children that 100% need medication. There are some that can cope without it. And which is better? I mean, that's a personal choice, I guess. So I never tell parents that, but I think everyone needs to know their options, right? Like maybe we want to try without for I've had parents that have tried without for so long and then finally switch to medication and think, why didn't I do that sooner? This is night and day. It's a different child. They feel better about themselves. They can be successful academically. They can behave appropriately. And then I have some that have tried it and quit because they just don't really think it's helping, or that it changes their child in a way that they didn't anticipate or like. I have some that refuse flat out. It was not even a discussion.
Hmm.
So it's hard. There's definitely an uptick in mental health, huge uptick in mental health needs for children, teens. I think for everybody, if you look at the statistics of like people on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, it's skyrocketing, but especially for our youth and our children. Hard to say why. I don't want to speculate, but I do think a lot of it comes down to like our modern civilization. A couple things. One is we have time for that now.
Hmm.
Before you have to have animals and crops and farms, and you don't have time to worry about that, right? Like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then two, I think I think in large part due to social media and the internet is really taking its toll on the human race. So that's my own personal opinion. There's plenty of research to back that up. It's not going away. So it's finding that balance, right? It's helped teaching our children and our peers really as adults how to use this effectively. So everyone says the train has left the station. It's not going back. But I do think it will be interesting to see our children become adults. I think how they handle the internet and social media in their own homes is going to be drastically different than what we did, because I feel like it just came and it was here and prolific before we even knew what to do with it. And now we're like trying to backpedal and play catch up, and it's a much different thing. All of our kids that have this, I guarantee they're going to grow up, and I bet none of their kids will, because they're going to say it's kind of like when I grew up. Well, my kids don't sneak out and they don't do this, they don't do that, because I did all of that and I know how to prevent it and what to watch for, all of those things. So there's no way they're going to allow their kids to get away with the same things that our kids have been able to, because we just don't know. We're not using it in the same ways. So
So you think because they know so much and have been exposed to so much, they will restrict more than we have?
I think so. And you're seeing that in some famous people and some people in the media that have had significant exposure to things online that are inappropriate. They've been really damaging, and they're like, well, I'm not doing that. All the huge tech giants, this, Bill Gates and what's his name? Apple.
Steve Jobs.
Yes, all their families, all of those people that work in those industries, their children do not have it. They go to schools without technology, without social media, without cell phones. So it's an interesting era to be a parent.
Hmm.
I always say we have 90% more things to deal with. I don't know if that's a good percentage, but I'm like, just the internet alone being in our homes, the computers and the internets and cell phones and everything that we're having to deal with it. Parents before, it's just this whole segment of the population they never had to worry about or imagine. I mean, the worst that could happen, you see one, like an R-rated movie at a friend's house, right? Or you see a nudie mag, which is really pretty benign compared to a video. I don't know. I think it's like an interesting social experiment that we're living through. It's been a runaway train. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I deal a lot with that in elementary, a lot with calling parents for kids that have been exposed or had exposure and then are sharing that at school, or even just, it's the same with adults, right? We're one way in person, and it doesn't exclude you from being very inappropriate online or even nasty and mean behind the computer. So messages on the school computers, or texting, or images, or anyway, the list goes on and on at elementary.
So you really are saying that you maybe think a lot of this problem is really technology.
Yeah. Yeah. Combined with like people are more isolated now. We don't live by families. as much. So, you have probably on purpose, because people are like, oh, I'm not living by my family because they'll tell me to stop living a certain way or doing certain things, right? You have a sense of anonymity.
Mm.
So if nobody knows I'm doing this, whether you think it's right or wrong, it takes away some of the shame, because no one can point their finger at you, say,
Mm.
hey, knock it off. Or maybe you shouldn't, even silly things like, maybe you shouldn't go into work an hour late every day, or what are you doing? Like, get to work, get going. You know what I mean? Like, you live in the past, we've lived, I think, closer to families in smaller communities. And with that leaving, there's people are more isolated, you have more anonymity. Then you add a screen in front of you where people don't even know who you are. So it's an interesting thing.
The accountability, though, that's kind of what people are.
That is the word. People are lacking accountability. That's right. And we've had this huge societal shift where everything is relative. It's what feels good to me, what feels right to me, what I think is okay. And so how that works out for a school counselor, and I don't know how my colleagues, if they would agree with this or not, but how I view this is, so that's really great if you're an adult and you want to do whatever you want, that's fine. However, we also don't live in bubbles if you have children, because all of that comes down the line. So if your lifestyle is creating an in-hospital environment or dangerous or whatever, well, but this is how I want to live my life, this is how I choose. But then you have children there, and then they come to school, trauma and issues and things like that. So it's hard because our society is telling us there's really no consequences, there's really no right and wrong, you can do whatever you want. But it's I feel like every conversation people want to have or discussion they want to have, they want to do it in a bubble. So they want to talk about education in a bubble, they want to talk about parenting in a bubble. No one wants to say, well, what you do after school in the evening affects your kid's education at school, right? No one wants to take accountability for that. Nobody wants to say, you're right, I might have to go to bed early so I can get my kid up early so we can be on time to school. Or I might have to spend 20 minutes a night reading with them instead of out. I'm not going to list all the sort of things that parents in the community do, but I live in my school community. So it's my youngest son's school, and I go to
Mm.
school, and I love the community. And we actually have a really great school, and we have a great school community. And, like, I'm not a perfect parent for sure. I don't want to sound like, all these parents are doing these dumb things. I do dumb things all the time. But I just think we have to be careful not to get so relative and to think that nothing we do matters to anybody but us, because it affects everybody, and for adults, there is a certain amount of leeway you have with, yes, you can do what you want. However, once you have children, then you have a responsibility to those children also. And that's not a discussion people want to have. They want to say, well, our schools are failing because of this, or the teachers are not doing their job because of this.
Mm.
And nobody wants to say, and this, right? Or in combination with. So that's a tough conversation to have when you can't look at the whole picture.
That's excellent. And that is hard because we all have to take a look inside and say, how can I help this situation? Or even that once I'm an adult and I don't have children, like these young adults, to realize I'm an adult who needs to maybe contribute to society, like
Oh, that's
go to
kind of,
work.
yeah, watch the news, see what's happening.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, we're in an interesting spot. All is not lost. There are great children, there are great teachers at our school. There are people that are doing a lot of good things. But it's, how it is. It's the small percentage that needs the most help that is difficult to find ways to do that effectively.
So let's get into just what is your specific role as a counselor to help these kids?
So school counselors, and this is across the board, this is nationwide, the American School Counseling Association, we focus on 3 domains: academics, social emotional learning, and college and career readiness. So I can kind of work within those 3 domains to help our students become successful adults, I guess is where we're going with, right? And at the building level, what that looks like is I do whole class, I do school-wide programs. Like I have an incentive program that I do for behavior, where we reward positive behavior. I have also do classroom guidance lessons where I go in and we do social emotional learning on the whole level. So that might be like working on test anxiety. That might be working on the younger grades. That's like tattling versus like tattling versus reporting. What's appropriate, like empathy. We work a lot on. I teach a lot about empathy and what that is and what that looks like and why it's important.
Hmm.
We talk about coping skills. So things you can do when you have a hard day, or if you fail, things that are hard. What can I do to help me calm down, to help me feel better, other than be angry, be upset, want to hurt myself. So
Hmm.
positive, healthy coping skills. And then, or it might be problem solving, peer relationships. The list goes on and on. Study skills, organizational skills. So I do whole classroom lessons, and then small groups also would be like, so you think of it as like whole school, and then you do small group for people that maybe need more support. And that might be like a girls group for girls that are having a hard time getting along, or that could be anger management for some of our friends that just can't seem to stay calm when they get angry. Or it might be like a grief and loss group for people that have lost loved ones, or divorced families, or things like that. And then you have a tier 3 where you work individually with students. And those are the kids that just have a lot going on. Usually, I think in my experience, it'll either be like severe anxiety or severe trauma. And that's trauma from everything you can imagine: incarcerated parent, violence at home, maybe a nasty divorce or an ongoing custody dispute, things like that. So
Hmm.
that's kind of my role. And then everything in between, right? Anytime we need extra help, or there's an emergency, or things like that. So anything really that has to do with social emotional learning, and then to track those things the best. So my goal is to help every student be successful academically, right? So if their social emotional is so out of control that they can't learn, then that's what we're working on. Or if they can't, so we track those things through behavior and attendance, and academics, behavior, attendance, and academics. That's the data points we have at school. So we can track behavior, when and how. We can track attendance. If they're not at school, then there's nothing we can do really to help them. And then academics, see if I can help them socially, emotionally, and they're able to sit through their math lesson that they hate and they just want to throw their chair every time it comes up. Well, I can see where we were academically, and then at the end of the semester, I can see where we were then, and you can see an improvement. So, I mean, school counseling used to not do tons with data. I mean, traditionally, and so the push is, and I think this is in every field, most everywhere across the board, is to look at your data, analyze your data to make sure what you're doing is effective, and so you can improve your program. So that's the trick. And it is difficult. It requires more time and effort.
Is it more than a 40-hour-a-week job for you?
Sometimes. So because I have children at home, I'm a little more rigid with my boundaries with work. Whereas I could stay at work every day till 5. Like I get done at 2:30, I could stay till 5 or 6. I could easily, especially when you're talking about like building reports and charting data. And my caseload. So our recommended caseload, I think, is 250 kids to one. And I'm the only counselor at my school. I have 750 kids about. So I'm not able to do with them as much as I would if I had a smaller group, right? Like
Right.
you try to do preventative so you don't have to do so much like crisis and emergency situations, but it's hard to get away from the crisis and emergency to do the preventative. I mean, not every kid needs me in the same way. So, I mean, it'd be nice if I could do for the kids that are doing really well, if I could do as much for them as I did the kids that were making the noise,
Mm.
demanding but that's just not the reality.
All right, Stephanie, let's just talk about, as you're helping these kids, what are they supposed to do to progress? Like how can they meet the requirements even of the schools in succeeding?
I think, I mean, the kids are great. They really are. A lot of times, this is the hard thing about elementary school, is a lot of what I need help with, a lot of what I need from the children, I need help from the parents. And some are able and willing, and some are one or the other, or not either. Right. So Some just aren't able to in the way you need them to. But so that's the trick with the little kids. You know, a lot of it is stems from things going on at home. But the kids are their responsibility is really just to get to school. I mean, if they can get to school, you know, there's so many adults there, we can help do the rest, I would say. I mean, they can't control what's going on at home. They can't really control on what's happened the last 5 years of their life or 7. So
I love that.
not as much on them when they're little, I would say. If it were high schoolers, then yes, then they're at those pivotal time in their life where they have to start deciding, like, what can I do to change? What can I do to, what kind of person do I want to be? But not quite that.
So what about the parents? What are you gonna, again, recommend that the parents' responsibility is?
Parents, so, you know, we just did a book club not too long ago, and one of the book in it is called Flooded, and it was really good. And it was talking about like how we can help our children when their brain is flooded and they're having a hard time like processing emotion, and how we can help them. And the one suggestion she has is to leave school at school and to not worry about it at home. And man, it's such a hot debate in our little book club, because I just am not sure. I have never been that parent that we leave school at school, because I feel like there is a certain amount of responsibility on the parent at home to help that student. So especially our students that are behind and struggling. Now, if you as a parent have read to your preschoolers, you know, your little kids, and have them at preschool and then off to school, that may be a strategy you want to take, where you'd say, I'm going to leave school at school. And if you have a kid that's really struggling, then let them come home to a loving home where they can feel unconditional love and work on things that they're good at. Maybe that's art, maybe that's singing, maybe that's music, maybe that's sports, and not make that a negative point in your relationship to the point that it destroys their little soul. That I think is good. However, there is also a lot of people that haven't done that work at home at all. So they haven't been read to, they don't help with, we don't have homework anymore, but, or they weren't helping with homework, but homework is kind of a thing of the past. I don't know how it is where you're at, but they don't do it at all here, really.
Even in high school?
They do have some if they don't finish, but it's not like when I was in where we had tons and tons. They have some in high school, but I think that's mostly they'll give them so much work, and if, you know, they can kind of get it done when they want. But I still am a little bit old school where I think, no, the parents' responsibility, I'll tell you what parents' responsibility is: get them to school on time every day. I don't care if you have to carry your kid barrel roll crying in the front door, bring them to me. I will take them. We will be fine. Give them a hug and a kiss, tell them you have a great day, and walk out the door. Our kids with anxiety, if the parent's waiting, telling them, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll be back, I love you, all of that just increases that it's going to make that separation harder. It's like building the anticipate that the kid is having the anxiety over them leaving. Separation anxiety is what we call it. But if they can just, if they stay in that moment, they're building that anxiety, and it's just becoming a bigger and bigger thing, rather than saying, I love you, have a great day, and walking out the door. That kid is going to be able to climb that mountain quicker. It's going to be a smaller problem. So get them there on time every day and pick them up on time. These kids are so little, and you have a 6-year-old wait an hour. That's a long time for a 6-year-old. That might as well be a whole day. So we don't have a huge problem with that, but that's pretty much the parent's role. And then I would say, if your child is struggling in reading or writing or math, not even writing, I would just say reading and math, then as a parent, you need to read 20 minutes a day with your child. You need either read to them or have them read out loud as at their level, and then do math facts. That's it. If our parents did those two things, we would have no kids behind. I think that's my own personal experience with my own kids, like as a mother and also working in the school, because we have some kids that have zero outside help, like nothing, zero. And then the parents are so mad that they're not getting good grades, that they're failing, that they don't understand. And our kids are behind. Like all of the kids came in behind. So everyone did the best they could online learning, but it wasn't the same. And everybody knows that now. But when you're even like for one of my kiddos, who is was on or above grade level and doing really well after COVID was hating school and miserable and felt stupid and thought he couldn't do anything and felt ineffective, not because he couldn't, but because he was in second and now he's in fourth. And the difference in writing and assignments and things like that, I think was totally overwhelming him.
Wow.
And so by about Christmas, we turned the corner, right? But we were doing a lot at home, reading and writing and doing this stuff at home, and math facts, and trying to help him feel more capable. Because if you feel capable, you will try. But if you feel like it's just too hard, you don't even try. And if you don't try, you can never get better. That's it. Just you gotta and build a relationship with kids, be there for them. Don't go home and lock yourself in your room. Don't go home and get on the internet all day. Don't spend time, all this extra time dating or whatever the situation may be, because there's a lot of things taking our attention away from our kiddos. They need it.
That's interesting. I don't know if you remember Katie in third grade. But it was interesting because I did drop her off and then I worried about her the whole day. But every time she would come home with a smile on her face. How was your day? Oh, it was fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was.
It was the break. It wasn't the school day. It was the break. And that is kind of a reality with anxiety. And I tell our kiddos, I tell parents this all the time when they're struggling with anxiety. I said, look, this isn't, because people want it fixed, right? You want it to be better. And also it's hard to watch your child struggle. And so I say, look, they have anxiety, and this is something they're going to struggle with probably their whole life. So the earlier you can get them the tools and the coping skills for them to start to practice, like, oh, when I start to feel this, I can do this. And if I do this, it will lessen that. You know what I mean? It's cyclical. And so the sooner you can help them do that, you will prevent a lot of social, emotional distress and problematic, probably feelings, toward yourself and behaviors. So, and that's where like outside therapy comes in handy, or we don't really have the time in schools that I can't schedule 700 kids a week or 300 for that matter, but we don't really have the time to go. I mean, I work on my kids with certain strategies, but we don't have as much time to like really set them up for success. In fact, I was just listening to the lady that from that book club, and she said, if I can see a kid at the age of 7 or 8 for anxiety, I can usually help them or fix the problem within a few sessions, where if I start to see them as a teenager, it's years, because it's layers. By then they have all of these things built up around that, I'm not good enough, or I'm dumb, or nobody likes me, or they have all this other things piled on top of a physiological response that their body's having, which is anxiety, So, I mean, it's funny because it's really what you need to do at home is really pretty simple. We used to do all the homework packets and nonsense of all, and the more kids I have, I feel like I just have them read 20 minutes out loud every day at their level and increase that as they go, and get math. When I think about like society as a whole, I think it's everybody's responsibility to raise the next generation. You know what I mean? Like we have to do it together. It's easy to be really pessimistic about the future or be really worried. It's transitional time right now. We live in transition. Parents can't do it on their own. It's exhausting work. And teachers can't do it on their own. They know it's exhausting work, and school counselors can't do it on their own. So I think sometimes we all look to each other for like, how do I fix this? What do I do? And really you have to use a team approach. At my school, we want to work with our families. We want to work with, if a parent comes to me and says, I don't know what to do, I say, here's some things you can do. Let me give you some resources. Let me tell you some things that might help. And, I'm a mom, so I from personal experience also, this is what's worked for my kids. You could try this. And every child is an individual. That's the hard thing about my work. And that's what is so exhausting. As I say, I work with, I tease and I say OPK, like it's a bad thing. Like, oh, I work with OPK. It's other people's kids, right?
Okay. I didn't know that one, but
it's not one. It's my own. I work with OPK, but that's why, but you know, it's not, it's the reality of the work is that every individual is different. And so every approach is different, every intervention is different, everything is individualized. And so it would be much easier if I could say, we could say, okay, here's what works with anxiety, these 6 things. So every kid that walks in the door, I do these 6 things, cured. Okay, every kid that comes in with depression or suicidal thought, we do these 3 things, cured. You know, but that's not the nature of working with people.
Reality. Yeah.
Yeah. So when everything's individualized, it's always an experiment. It's always hit or miss. It's always we approach this as a team with myself, the teacher, the administrators, the families, and we all try to maybe do something a little different or help that child come up with things that work for them. And then if that doesn't work, guess what? We shift and we try something else. And we shift and we try something else. And sometimes it takes us all year. Sometimes it takes us 2 weeks. We'll see a kid have a 100% behavior shift and we're like, yes, that's awesome. But there's other kids that we, you know, work with all year and see little change, or we have one that we worked with all year, severe behavior problems, and night and day by the end of the year.
Hmm.
And that's really gratifying, right? Because then he's getting the education that he needs that's going to impact his future. Some stay hard, some are quick, and some you just try and you just don't give up. You just keep trying. So then you start fresh the next year and you got to do it all again.
That's why you need a summer break.
That's why we get summers.
I love that I think even in interviewing you, I just was like, let's give some quick fixes on how to fix this. But you're right. It's so individual, so much of a different puzzle for each individuality, home environment. Like it's a team effort. It's that concept of it takes a village to raise a kid.
I mean, you can do like a starter pack, like anxiety starter pack or ADD starter pack, and you can kind of have some ideas, and that's not a bad thing, you know. So you have a starting point, because I think that's what usually happens as parents come in. They're like, I don't even know what to do. I have no idea where to start, how we got here, and where to go.
Hmm.
And then you try those, and then you modify and work and fit. But yeah, but that's in general. So.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie.
Well, thank you for having me, Shayla. It's always good to see you.
You're so fun. All right. We're going to encourage everyone to just keep learning, and we will sign off.